So, picture this. I showed up to what I thought was a routine job interview and accidentally crashed a high-stakes negotiation meeting. Yeah, that's how my week started. I remember striding into the lobby of this sleek, glass-covered office building, trying to look confident but secretly rehearsing, "Thank you for the opportunity," under my breath. My stomach was doing this weird backflip thing. Part nerves, part that vague sense you get right before something is about to go sideways. At first, everything seemed normal. The receptionist handed me a visitor badge with a "Welcome." That felt more like a warning, and I followed the signs toward the interview rooms. But the moment I opened the door to what I thought was room B, where my interview was supposed to take place, I stepped into a world that was anything but typical. Instead of a quiet office or some awkward chairs across from a single person who'd ask me predictable questions about strengths and weaknesses, I walked into a room buzzing with tension. Around a massive wooden table sat about 6 sharply dressed people, their faces set in expressions that would give the statue of David a run for his money. Papers sprawled out, laptops open, voices low but urgent. At first, I just froze by the door, blinking like an idiot, trying to figure out if I'd somehow wandered onto the set of a corporate thriller. That's when my stomach did another somersault. Oh no, something was definitely off. And then came the moment I realized I wasn't late for an interview. I'd crashed a meeting I was absolutely not invited to. The kind of meeting where people argue over deals worth millions and occasionally throw around terms I barely understand, like equity stake and contingency clauses. Meanwhile, I was standing there in my admittedly neat but far too casual button-down shirt and sneakers, clutching my portfolio like a lifeline. Before I could backpedal out of the room, a woman near the table caught my eye. She looked friendly enough, but had this look like she was trying not to burst out laughing at the whole scene. That's when I noticed she was wearing the same interview badge style as me. Then it hit me, she was another candidate. Darla, apparently. She leaned over subtly and whispered, "Ah, you're in the wrong room." But thanks to my social awkwardness, I just gave her a clueless nod as if I totally knew what was going on. Smooth. Then, from across the table, this tall guy in a sharp suit, Mr. Grayson, the hiring manager I'd only heard about from the company's website, looked right at me. And suddenly I was pulled into the conversation like a magician's rabbit out of a hat. They mistook me for one of the negotiators. So there I was, trapped, trying to sound like I belonged, tossing around vague ums and I sees while my brain scrambled for phrases that sounded smart but were totally made up on the spot. If bluffing was a sport, I was in the major leagues, but then, just as I was starting to get a tiny bit comfortable, Mr. Grayson looked at me dead in the eye and asked a question that stopped my heart cold. And there I was, completely clueless. So, before all that chaos happened, the moment I accidentally crashed that negotiation, I was in a pretty familiar funk. You know, the kind where you're stuck in job hunt limbo, scrolling through listings on your phone while simultaneously convincing yourself that your couch has become a perfectly acceptable workspace. I'd been at it for weeks, hitting up every opportunity I could find, and honestly, it was exhausting. Every application felt like shouting into a void, and every rejection, well, those stung like a paper cut you just can't shake. That's when Sarah stepped in. She's my best friend, the person who somehow manages to be both brutally honest and ridiculously supportive. We were sitting in our usual spot at that crowded, slightly grimy coffee shop that smells like burnt espresso and ambition. She was stirring her latte like it was some kind of magic potion while I sipped my black coffee, trying not to look like a mess. "You have to apply for this one," she said, looking me straight in the eye like she was issuing an ultimatum. Not that I was in much shape to argue. I raised an eyebrow. "I don't know, Sarah. That company? They seem super corporate, super fancy. I'm not sure I'd fit in." She laughed, the kind of laugh that hints at a plan you're both skeptical and curious about. "Listen, even if you don't think it's exactly your vibe, you need to get in there. Sometimes the best stuff happens when you least expect it." I remember thinking, yeah, right. Like me walking into an actual hostage negotiation. Anyway, before that day, my routine was pretty mellow. I'd wake up late, walk down to the coffee shop, nurse a few drinks while scrolling job boards, and maybe send off 1 or 2 applications. It felt safe and predictable. But the thought of the interview coming up, that was a different kind of energy. Like a pit opening in my stomach the night before a big exam, mixed with the weird hope that this time maybe something would click. The night before, I tried to psych myself up. Practiced answers in front of the bathroom mirror. Some stiff, formal stuff about teamwork and overcoming challenges. I even tried to remember the names of the company's products and their mission statement, though honestly, most of it blurred together. I wasn't exactly walking in fully prepped. More like fumbling my way toward pretending I knew what I was doing. The next morning, I landed myself back at the coffee shop. The same one where Sarah and I brainstormed my little leap of faith. Except this time, my mind wasn't on the steam swirling off my coffee, it was on the interview. I checked the time, double-checked the map on my phone, and tried, semi-successfully, not to freak out about whether or not I had actually matched the right location to the email. There was this strange juxtaposition going on. Outside, people went about their usual rush, the honking cars, cyclists weaving through traffic, folks grabbing their coffee to go. While inside, my head was already somewhere else, stuck in the future tense of what ifs and maybes. Now, I don't want to spoil what happened next too soon, but let me just say, I'd made one tiny misstep that seemed innocent enough at the time. You know how sometimes you follow a sign or a label without really paying attention? Yeah, that was me. I followed a sign that said Room B, and I thought I was simply walking into the interview zone. But, spoiler alert, that Room B wasn't a holding room or an interview room at all. And honestly, I didn't realize it immediately. Because instead of the usual awkward handshake and those painfully scripted interview questions, I stumbled into a room where the air was thick with tension. The kind of atmosphere where you could almost hear the unsaid things hanging over the table, like a storm ready to break. It looked like a scene out of a TV show about ruthless business deals. The suits, the serious faces, the quick glances exchanged across piles of documents. And there I was, posture halfway between, I totally belong here and help me someone. Sarah's pep talk echoed in my mind. But suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was stepping closer to a dream job or walking straight into a trap. That moment, right before the door shut behind me and I realized I was in way over my head. That was when the whole day flipped from nerves to full-on, heart-pounding disbelief. So, there I was, standing just inside the door of Room B, trying to piece together exactly where I'd landed. The energy in the room wasn't what I expected from a casual interview. It was charged electric, like the kind of place where people say things under their breath that could make or break millions of dollars. But honestly, I was still trying to figure out if I'd accidentally wandered into an episode of Suits, Protecture, or Spillions rather than a friendly chat about my resume. At the table, 6 people stared at their screens or shuffled papers, throwing around phrases like leveraging assets and projected margins. They were the definition of intense. And me? I was probably the definition of completely out of my depth. Then I caught movement in my peripheral vision. A woman to my right, the same woman from before. Carla. She's the one with the friendly but competitive vibe, like she'd been ready to turn this interview into a full-contact sport. Her eyes locked onto me for a brief second, and she leaned over, whispering sharply but low enough that only I could hear, "You're in the wrong room." I blinked at her, fighting the urge to ask if I'd wandered into Narnia or maybe Wonderland, but instead I just gave her a slow, clueless nod. Even at that moment, the gears in my brain were spinning so fast they short-circuited. I was too flustered to put 2 and 2 together. I just sort of froze there like I suddenly wore invisible blinkers. Before I could make my retreat, that's when Mr. Sird. Grayson, yeah, the intimidating hiring manager with the I could intimidate a grizzly bear vibe, pivoted his chair around and his gaze locked on me. His eyes were sharp, no nonsense, and the kind that could probably read my resume just by looking at me. Without missing a beat, he said, perfect timing. Tell me your thoughts on the valuation adjustments we proposed this quarter. Wait, what? My mouth went dry. Valuation adjustments? For a second, my brain just stalled. I couldn't even fake a heartbeat. But clearly, there was no turning back. Everyone around the table was looking at me, waiting. So I did the only thing I could think of, which was to lean in slightly, attempt a nod, and respond with a cautious, I think, the adjustments. They really bring the asset's value more in line with current market trends, right? Silence. Then a few raised eyebrows. Carla, who had just seconds before warned me to sneak out, now gave me this half-amused, half-sympathetic look. Mr. Sympathetic look. Grayson narrowed his eyes and, with that slow, deliberate tone that means someone's about to dissect you, asked, "Can you walk us through your approach to mitigating potential risks associated with the contingent liabilities?" I swear I could feel my heart doing somersaults inside my chest. Contingent liabilities? My knowledge about them was somewhere between "I think it's a bad thing" and "sounds like something in the fine print." I shuffled in my seat, desperate for some lifeline, some clue I could grab onto. Well, I guess it's important to analyze any possible outcomes and develop strategies that address those risks proactively. The room was quiet, too quiet. Then Carla cleared her throat, shooting a quick glance at Mr. Grayson. "You're the new consultant, right?" she said, a sly smile creeping onto her face. "I didn't realize we'd hired already." Mr. Grayson looked at me with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "Consultant?" he echoed. I blinked. "Consultant? New?" Oh no, the confusion circle was complete. At that moment, I realized my into this world of high-stakes negotiation might actually mean I had to start playing the part fast. My mind was reeling. I was about to be asked to explain things I barely understood, to justify positions I didn't hold, and to pretend I was a savvy professional instead of some guy clutching a portfolio who just wanted a chance to have a decent conversation about his skills. And then, before I could fully panic, I caught Carla's eyes again. There was a flicker there, something like an unspoken promise or warning. Like, hang on, this is about to get even messier. Suddenly, the tension in that room didn't just feel intimidating, it felt personal, like I was now part of a game where I didn't have the rulebook. And when Mr. Grayson leaned forward and asked in that icy tone, "What approach would you recommend for the upcoming contract renegotiations?" I knew I was on the spot with no safety net. I swallowed hard, because honestly, I didn't have a clue. So, there I was, staring blankly at Mr. Grayson, feeling the sweat bead on my forehead like an amateur marathon runner at the starting line, but without any training or energy gels. The room waited, the silence wrapped around me like an awkward sweater I hadn't wanted to wear in the first place. Then something, maybe desperation, maybe a flash of that Sarah pep talk optimism kicked in. I took a breath and plunged headfirst into what I can only call the world's most improvised answer. Well, I'd say the key is to focus on, maintaining clear communication channels with all parties involved. And, also, to leverage any mutually beneficial terms that align with the company's strategic goals. So, really, it's about finding common ground while, protecting our interests. I could almost hear the collective raised eyebrows, but surprisingly, no one shut me down immediately. "Mr. Morrow?" Grayson leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers like he was weighing some secret calculus, and then, unexpectedly, he cracked this half-smile. The kind that made you wonder if you just stumbled on some accidental genius or if he was humoring a hapless newbie. "Not bad," he said. "You've got a fresh perspective." That phrase echoed in my head, fresh perspective. Was that corporate code for, "You're lucky I'm in a good mood"? Maybe. But it felt like a tiny victory. Carla, who'd been giving me the side-eye since I walked in, finally softened a bit too. She leaned forward, adding in a more collaborative tone, "Well, fresh perspectives can shake things up. Maybe that's exactly what we need." "Mr. Case, Mr." Grayson shifted gears and started referring to me as the consultant, more openly, tossing me a few simpler questions that I managed to answer by leaning heavily on buzzwords I'd rehearsed reading online and, well, some clever nodding. At one point, he even asked about my experience with negotiation software. I froze again for a second because, spoiler, I didn't have any. But I dodged it with a vague, "I'm eager to learn any tools that can enhance the analytical process." Smooth, right? Pure theater. By the time the meeting wrapped up, instead of being the undead job hunter fading into the shadows, I was awkwardly shaking hands with Mr. Grayson and Carla, who now seemed less like an opponent and more like, well, a professional acquaintance. And then came the part that still makes me do a double take. Mr. Grayson actually offered me a position, not as the consultant I'd accidentally played for, but as part of the very team that supported these negotiations behind the scenes. Turns out, my bumbling, buzzword-laden answers gave off the vibe of someone adaptable, quick on their feet, and able to handle pressure without losing their cool. A rare find, he said. Sarah would have been proud. I walked out of that building feeling like I'd survived a corporate roller coaster, my legs a little wobbly, my mind racing with, what just happened? But also oddly excited, because sometimes in the weirdest, most unexpected detours, you find opportunity. Looking back, that day taught me a few things. Confidence isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up, trying, and being willing to look ridiculous while figuring things out. Improvisation isn't just for comedians or musicians, it's a secret laser weapon when life throws curveballs. And maybe, just maybe, luck is really just being prepared to make the most of the chaos you didn't expect. So yeah, was it luck? Skill? Pure nerve with a dash of obliviousness? Honestly, I'm still not sure. But whatever it was, it changed everything. And you know what? I'm actually kind of hoping to find out what comes next with a little less crashing into the wrong rooms, hopefully.